From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Monday, October 27, 2025. Australia's most influential retailers are uniting to support Australian manufacturers and producers against an onslaught of cheap, disposable products from e-commerce giants like Temu and Shein. They're warning of serious economic, taxation and environmental consequences if the government doesn't level the retail playing field. That story's live now at theaustralian.com.au, and it's part of News Corp Australia's campaign Back Australia, aimed to support local jobs and industries. In the world of radio, they don't get much more influential than 2GB, the century-old Sydney talk station that no politician can ignore. But now one of its hosts has found himself in the middle of a complicated business deal. And today The Australian's revealing it involves someone with a very colourful past. Today, why this is a big deal for Nine Radio's crown jewel and why its star broadcasters might soon be reporting to a new boss.
Hey, Dad! Where are you, Dad? Here I am, Johnny!
2GB is one of Australia's oldest and most significant radio stations.
Fat cats, bureaucrats, pig bats, carbon tax, envy and
Sydney's home of big personalities, big opinions and big claims to influence.
2GB, power station.
Every big personality in broadcast has made 2GB their home over the years.
I've actually engaged two media defo lawyers.
This
and we'll
is
work
the
on
John Laws Show, the undefeated champion of Australian radio.
Do you understand, Julia, that you are the issue today because there are people now saying your name is not Julia but Julia?
How can that be bloody justice? If there's a court system anywhere in the world that allows this to happen, it's bad justice.
You're reading from the No pamphlet.
I'm not reading. Excuse me, Prime Minister.
Well, that's in the
I'm
No
not reading.
pamphlet.
Excuse me.
And the latest big 2GB character to make the headlines for perhaps the wrong reasons is Mornings host Mark Levy. Steve Jackson is The Australian's Media Diary editor. Jacko, who is Mark Levy?
Mark Levy is a guy that listeners of 2GB and their sister networks across Australia, 3AW, 4BC, over in Perth, 6BR, will know because he's been a presenter on the National Wide World of Sports program. In New South Wales, he's a bigger deal. He's part of the continuous call team, so rugby league audiences will really know him. But more importantly, since last December, he's the guy who's replaced the radio king, Ray Hadley, as the host of one of its most important shows. There's Breakfast with Ben Fordham. Now there's Mornings with Mark Levy.
Company will check some news headlines with Erin in just a moment, but I'm a little nervous because yesterday we were talking about turmeric lattes, and she's brought in a turmeric and honey latte and she wants me to try it.
Now, listeners this week might have been slightly confused when Mark Levy came out with a statement about his ownership of a restaurant. Why was he suddenly talking about this?
If the listeners are confused, I was bamboozled. It was so hard to keep track of everything that was going on in Mark Levy's life in the past week. So his restaurant, which he opened last July, Pronto Sylvania, just south of Sydney, down towards what we call the Shire here, he opened it last July. In August, it was shut temporarily, apparently, the couple of problems going behind the scenes. What we saw happen last week was that the business behind his restaurant, St George Hospitality, was wound up in the Supreme Court, and Levy is now in the process of selling off the restaurant and all the equipment to repay the debts that are owed. He has stressed they will be paid. He's out of the restaurant game, he says, because he needs to focus on his number one job, his number one priority, broadcasting.
And now in today's Media Diary in The Australian, you're revealing another twist. What is it?
He's now been alleged to be the middleman in a six-figure high-interest loan between a boxing promoter mate of his and a trucking company boss who's got historic ties to the notorious Nomads outlaw motorcycle gang.
Okay, so let's just step through that closely. Why would someone like Mark Levy become the middleman in a loan?
I've been told one of his close friends, Oliver Jozeski, has come to him and asked for help finding a six-figure loan. I'm told it's about $100,000. They've known each other for years. They go back through their days having mutual involvement in a Macedonian rugby league football club that's based out of Sydney. And Levy, helpful guy, has decided to put him in touch with some people. These people turn out to be very successful businessmen who run a national bulk haulage company and trucking fleet called NJ Ashton. And Levy's put him in touch and said, can you help my friend out? And it gets more complicated. Oliver is also a boxing promoter who's working with Anthony Mundine, former world champion fighter, on bringing the Bare Knuckle Fight series to Australia, which has just premiered in Brisbane last month.
Right. I saw the Downton Abbey movie last week. I thought that plot was complicated. This is getting even more hard to follow.
No, grab your notepad, Claire, because on the other side, the trucking boss who gave the loan, his business partner brother has historic ties to the Nomads bikie gang.
Right.
Not only that...
This is so Sydney.
Not only that, 20 years ago he got sentenced to a 9-year stretch in prison for maliciously stabbing an enemy in the street and also hoarding an entire arsenal of firearms at his Western Sydney house just weeks after he got shot in the buttocks in a Sydney nightclub in a targeted hit by the Hells Angels.
Another thing that's very Sydney about that is that this guy, Norman Yameen, the former nomad, has now had a bit of a redemption story and can be described as an entrepreneur and philanthropist.
It's an amazing redemption story. He grew up in a really tough environment, obviously made mistakes, and he admitted it as much in court. But what happened was he went to prison, and while he was in there, he taught himself to read and write. Since he's come out, he's built a really successful trucking empire with his brother. Not only that, he's now a commander of the Knights of Malta, an order that does charitable work throughout Sydney. He feeds the homeless twice a week on Martin Place in the CBD and down at Woolloomooloo. He partners with the Police Citizens Youth Club on a whole heap of projects like giving presents to underprivileged kids at Christmas. He is a remarkable redemption story.
How did Levy's part in all this come to light?
Well, not only did he affect the introduction between the trucking boss and the boxing promoter, it's understood he also agreed to become a personal guarantor for the loan. So when the debt's not repaid, he's called in and he's responsible.
And what's Mark Levy saying about it all?
Well, he's not saying anything about it, and he never will, because a day after scant details about this case appeared in the Daily Telegraph just last week, all of a sudden, debt repaid, everyone signed non-disclosure agreements, nothing to see here. But the big question is for Nine Radio, your host, who's presenting the morning show, who calls politicians to account and says the Treasurer can't manage the economy, it's difficult for him to call out public figures when he himself is being called before the courts for his own financial arrangements.
There's no suggestion Yameen's past has any connection to his brother's present dealings with Giuseppe or Levy, and of course there's no allegation there's been any criminality in this whole affair. It's just one of those great media yarns. Coming up, Mark Levy might soon have a new boss as Nine looks to offload talk radio. So who'd want this legacy broadcaster? Earlier this year, Nine Entertainment, which owns the Nine TV network, the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Financial Review, it sold its property advertising business Domain. Now there's also talk Nine might offload the radio business. So why and who'd buy it?
When Nine Entertainment merged its television operation with its couple of metropolitan tabloid newspapers and the Talkback Radio division, the idea was, and we all know the word, synergy. They were going to find all these efficiencies between the three businesses. Unfortunately, they all have very distinct markets. So they've now sold off their potentially greatest growth asset, Domain, which does seem an unusual choice. Nine Radio is an older audience. Nine Television is a younger audience. We're talking Married at First Sight on television against people complaining about the pothole out the front of their house. Very distinct audiences, some overlap, but the bigger problem is with advertisers, the same advertisers aren't trying to target both those demographics. They want the one that's on TV. So what we've seen is that Nine is now contemplating offloading their existing talkback radio network and potentially getting into a model that has greater growth in a younger demographic, potentially commercial FM radio, and letting someone else take on the talkback radio network division. Now, there are a number of interested parties, and we've reported on this quite extensively, but they include names like John Singleton, who a lot of listeners will be aware, used to own Nine Radio back in its days as Macquarie Media, and he might make a return to the fray. And if he does, Ray Hadley would come out of retirement. But then there's also Maurice Newman, former chairman of the ABC. He would also like to take it on with a company called Australian Digital Holdings.
John Singleton is in his early 80s now, but he is the original colourful Sydney media identity. He has been married multiple times. He's got opinions about everything. So personally, I'd be hoping it's Singleton buying that network, just for your purposes, Jacko. You write a lot of good media diary items about him. But what's in it for Singleton, apart from bringing his favourite son, Ray Hadley, back to the airwaves?
It would be another wonderful story in a collection of wonderful stories about this great entertainer. He owned the network, sold it for multiples of millions. We're talking 160 million, I think his last third share in the company went for. And if he could pick it up for $40 million, it's like Kerry Packer saying you only get one Alan Bond in your life. John Singleton, he's worth more than $800 million. It would just be a plaything for him.
Would you anticipate any other changes to the lineup if Singleton were to return?
Yes. I'm led to believe he's already mapped it out. We know what the changes will be. Goodbye Live and Local in Brisbane. You'd have Ben Fordham at breakfast in Brisbane. You'd have Ray Hadley back on air in Sydney and in Brisbane. They might keep some Live and Local in the afternoon. Melbourne, safe as houses. They're doing a great job down there. Don't interfere, don't intervene. Let them do what they're doing. 6PR, blow the whole thing up and start again.
Steve Jackson edits The Australian's Media Diary. You can check it out right now at theaustralian.com.au.